Wonderful. Thank you. Boy, this is all men. This looks like guys telling Bill, this looks like a good old-fashioned Bill Gothard seminar right here. I grew up on Gothard. How many grew up on Bill Gothard? And I learned a lot of great things. But I probably realized in the late 80s, I go, how come there's no ladies leaders in here? But that's good. They're having fun down the street. They made them walk outside, I think, to their gathering. So anyway, give you a quick thing that I was in the shower this morning. That's a good thing, and I get to talk with a lot of people on church planting topics. I planted. Quick snapshot. Kid moved 27 times as a kid. Parents moved everywhere. I lived in Washington, Oregon. My dad worked in logging camps. He spent my little infant childhood in Valceds, Oregon. And then Lakeview. Then my parents met at Canyonville Bible Academy. And then my dad was the alumni president back in the 1950s. They were high school kids. That's back when there was 3 of those high schools in the United States, 3 boarding in Texas. But Canyonville was a hopping place back in the day. And then my brother graduated from Canyonville. And then we had lots of wonderful friends in Oregon and Washington. But we were very much a gypsy vagabond family. My dad, I'm going to tell tonight the story. My dad died of an overdose when he was 67. So I'm going to tell quickly tonight. He was a vibrant, young Assembly of God potential preacher, but he died of an overdose. I'm going to tell you what happened between Northwest Bible College and dying of an overdose. I'll give you that space. And there's a lot of learning that needs to happen in that space, just leadership-wise. But we moved all over the place. I went to a different school, K, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. I was never in the same school. Every September we moved. And so little did I know that every September I had to mitigate a different playground from kindergarten through 7th grade. So little did I know God was putting the staff in my hand that would be part of my leadership competency of always being able to get along with new people. So that ability as a pastor to build friendships with strangers, engage in conversation, was a survival necessity as a child and an adolescent. But man, it became a professional competency in my adulthood. Isn't it fascinating that whatever you've gone through is to help those now going through, and that our childhood is back in play in a good way. We were youth pastors for 7 years in San Jose for Charles Crabtree. I fell into that. I didn't even apply. I just walked in, and I was in the right spot in the right moment. It really has made me a Calvinist in many ways. In that leadership aspect, like, Lord, you just did this in my life. I don't come from any heritage. My grandfather cheated on my dad's mom, left the 5 kids. I only had one story of my grandfather my whole life. There's only one story I still have of my grandfather on my dad's side. He was caught in the trunk of a Buick with a woman, and my grandma Edith left him. I don't have a single human being who's ever walked up to me and said, man, your grandfather really helped me. So when I was in high school, the last name Hagen meant nothing. My dad also ran from God, had an out-of-wedlock child that came back into my life when I was 19. So she was 19, I was 25. So up until that's when I went to Bethany, my last name meant nothing. It was nothing. And my son, Tyler, had their first baby this last year. And about 2 weeks before Tyler's his son, Elias, was born, he just says to me one day, he says, man, Pops, I can't wait to give my child my childhood. So when the child that you did not want to have your childhood tells you that he wants his child to have his childhood, I'm not trying to be the Riddler here. It's a profound moment of Jesus I go, you saved me, Lord. You saved me. And I was able to produce, by God's grace and this amazing life partner and wife you gave me, a brand new culture and brand that my adult life looks nothing like my childhood life. How many would say the same thing, that your adult life has no reflection? Yet you'll be amazed how God has carried forth mysteriously certain competencies that were really born out of that season that has made you effective with people. So I was a youth pastor for 7 years. Then Karen and I planted Harvest Church in 1990 when we were 26 years old. We had 9 of us that went. The most significant was a man named Joe Elston. Joe, when I went to Bethel, San Jose, I was 20 years old, had been married for 3 months. I'd never even taken homiletics. They just were looking for a young married couple from Bethany, and we walked in to Paul Farron's Sunday school class at Bethel, San Jose for the first time, only visiting that church one time. And he said, you know what, we're looking for a young couple from Bethany. The junior high pastor left last Friday, and we're looking. He goes, you guys look the part. So that's a whole nother discussion. So we found ourselves the next Sunday. We were the junior high pastors at Bethel, San Jose. Sovereignly, it was crazy. Still a student. Frank was a college student at Bethany at that time. So we were there, mentored by Charles Crabtree, one of the greatest human beings that I've ever met in my life. He took me into his heart, not just his staff, and it was Camelot. I can't explain it. I had never been around organization. I grew up in little tiny churches that did the same thing Sunday morning, choir practice at 4, go to the fellowship hall, eat pie, Sunday night church, go eat some more pie. So that was life, very simple. And Bethel Church was amazing to me. So I began to grow in quantum leaps at that time. And then a 27 decade of Harvest, which was a great work. If you study organizational development, I was at the Nike factory yesterday. Most people outside of Portland or Oregon does not know who Bowerman was, the track coach. In every great organizational paradigm, there's a catalyst, which is a servant leader that's obscure, that is the real teacher, that inspires. Phil Knight was a track on the track team. He was a marginal, poor track runner, but Bowerman, his coach, inspired him. So then Knight became that, and then there's always another actor that becomes the living metaphor through tragedy. That was Steve Prefontaine. So the fact that Prefontaine won and then died in a car accident becomes this mystical combination of Phil Knight, Bowerman, Prefontaine, which creates the psyche behind the Nike thing that happened. How many know what Nike was originally called? Blue Ribbon Sports. Blue Ribbon Sports. And it was that way, and then he says the Japanese bank, that they still bank with the same bank. Some guy in Japan gave Phil Knight a chance on his company, and he stayed with that bank his whole life. It's still their bank in Japan for Nike. And they named it after this winged goddess named Nike, and the rest is history. But in my life, it's all these sovereign components happen. So we planted Decade of Harvest, which has been the precursor for the CMN movement. Everything is built on some type of previous catalyst. And so I'm an 80s youth pastor. Back in the 80s, guys, I'm 54, so in the 80s, I can't even remember what the problems were. We left one, I think I told this at the summit a couple of years ago, we left one theological footprint. The theological dilemma in the 1980s was only one thing. We were all trying to figure out if Amy Grant was a Christian. So that was our Council of Jerusalem. That was our Council of Jerusalem. Is Amy Grant a Christian? And then technology-wise, we started the 1980s with overheads. And we left the 1980s with better overheads. We had cardboard borders around our overheads so they wouldn't slowly float off the screen. Man, when we went to PowerPoint, think of the millions of people that lost their ministry job, their calling. Because they had perfected the art of facing the crowd in worship and changing the overhead projector. Remember that person that did that? Okay, where'd they go? There's millions. They just disappeared off the planet. The overhead changer lady. Guys, but great time planted. So we planted Harvest Church in 1990, and we were there 11 years. We started 7 congregations. 5 of them flourished. 2 of them closed. This is in the 1990s, long before campuses multi-site was even a gleam in our daddy's eye. We were planting churches the old-fashioned way with the district office and sending out a youth pastor with some families. And then I went to Michigan and took a large church, very large church, under the iconic leadership of Wayne Benson, who's a precious, incredible man. And we were there 5.5 years, and it was kind of I'm not trying to be provocative here when I say rock star job. In the Assemblies of God metrics of how you think about church life, it was probably one of the 5 destination churches. It was an overwhelming experience. I was 38 years old. Had 75 staff and $14 million budget and all of that. And all I can say is it's one of the great churches in America, but it's not what it's cracked up to be in that sense. That was where Camelot left me by necessity. And it poised me for what every leader needs, which I call a second salvation. At some point, midpoint in your leadership life, you either reattach to the simplicity of your calling, or you move into cryptic, cynic living, in which you become disillusioned and somewhat aloof, and you can function all the way to become an executive presbyter in that state of being, because it's so subtle and it's undetectable if you're talented, but in your heart you really lose something in the second half of your life. And so I'm very grateful to God for my mentors. I told you about Joe Wilson. When I went to Bethel, San Jose, I was there 2 weeks, and this man is in the Sunday school class, and he says, he has kids in the youth group. He drove a forklift at Hewlett-Packard, and he says, hey, he was 38, I was 20, and they were youth sponsors. And he said, hey, Scott, he goes, you want to get together and pray? And I said, sure, Joe. He said, how about 6 o'clock? And I said, that's right during dinner. He said, no, in the morning, you knucklehead. Okay, so he came to my apartment, my wife and I, and we didn't have kids yet, and he knocked on the door, and we read Proverbs, our little Larry Lee book there. And we read Proverbs and prayed together, and he was out the door at 7 on his way to Hewlett-Packard. He said, that was great, want to do it again? I said, yeah, tomorrow, next Monday? He goes, let's do it tomorrow. Knocked on the door. So we got a rhythm 5 days a week, 6 to 7, and I'm not exaggerating. We did that for 18 years together. We did it for 7 years in San Jose, 5 days a week, 6 o'clock in the morning. Joe Elston came in my life, and then he moved and helped us start Harvest Church. He's the founding father of that church. I'm the founding pastor. He's the founding father. And we did 11 more years. And then when I left at 38 for Grand Rapids, I was the same age. I wept in front of all those people on my farewell service, and I said, Joe, you were 38, I was 20 when we met. Now I'm 38. Like, you raised me, and now our morning prayer time is over. And up until that time, the only human being I ever saw, the first time in my life I ever saw somebody get up every morning at the crack of dawn to read their Bible. I'd never seen it done in my whole life until my roommate, Mark Powers, at Bethany, was the first guy I ever saw. Every time I woke up, the little lamp was on, and Mark was reading his Bible over at the desk as a college kid. And that's the first time I saw it. Boyd was in your brother. And then a couple months later, I'm on staff at Bethel, and Joe gets me out of bed in the morning, and it changed the trajectory of my life. So I've had a slow formation, a quiet formation. I know we all give our highlight reel. We don't really describe our daily grind, but I've had really a slow, formative process filled with ups and downs. And so we planted, and then we went to Michigan, had a great 5.5 years. I missed church planting. We returned to NorCal, became the church plant directors. And I could have stayed in Grand Rapids my whole life. It was a great church. We lost 1,000, gained 1,000. So the church stayed the same. They were coming out of the Brownsville revival in 2000. It was the second outbreak in the United States, honestly, of Brownsville, as far as they had 175,000. Now, up until that point in time, Grand Rapids was a staid, steady Bill Gothard church. So imagine Bill Gothard goes to Brownsville. Just think about that for a minute. Think about those two trains. And so the psyche of that church was fascinating. So we got there in 2000, had to bring closure to Brownsville. Then they wanted us to introduce diversity to the congregation. Rob Bell was 3 blocks away from me. In the rise of Rob Bell before he became a heretic. And all that was right there. It was a fascinating experience of leadership navigating that. So the church, we gained 1,000, lost 1,000. But after 5.5 years, the church was diverse, and I really felt somebody else could take it from here. So I really felt if I don't do this next piece, then it'll be left undone. But somebody else can do this better than me. But this piece, if I don't do it, it's going to be left undone. And I really wanted to re-engage with a younger generation of leaders and help them plant churches with biblical framing and conviction. So we planted Real Life Church, and we're a multi-site church. All of that. I'm on the CMN national team. I was part of the architecting of the CMN or the PAC Church idea 8 years ago. And now we have enough data to realize that I would say this. Most of the multi-site stuff you hear is smoke and mirrors. Okay. The way we do math nowadays, millennial math, is by the amount of campuses that we have. 4 campuses, 3 campuses, 6 campuses, 2 campuses. And you are credible by the number of campuses. In the old days, the pastor had one church, he had to fill it. So, and most of those guys, I pastored the big balcony church, and we had 5,000 seats. It never was filled. You could have 3,500 people, and it looked like the church was falling apart. So there's a whole group of pastors over there that would be buried in the cemetery. And on their tombstone it says, there lies Mark Rutland, there lies this person. They couldn't fill the balcony. Because they were in one of them 5,000 seaters. Okay. That very few people have ever filled those things. This building was so large in Grand Rapids, you could sit in the top corner balcony, and with a scope, you could not shoot a deer behind the pulpit. It was that far. Had to start the altar call on Thursday. You had different rest spots down that balcony stairs, resting areas for oxygen. You had to assimilate. You couldn't get there. From there to here to be saved, it would be impossible. Just having fun, but nowadays, so multi-site is the new wave. I think we're getting enough data now to realize there's substance there, but a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. And so it used to be the thick line was from you had the local church, thick line or local church here, district office here, and then the new church plant here. And this was a broken line between the local church and the church plant, and the thick line between district office and local church because of the governance. So what the AG did is it took that thick line and put it here, and took the broken line and put it here. That's basically what PAC is. So the auxiliary, ancillary relationship is with the district office, and the substantive governing line is with the local church. So basically now you have a bunch of superintendents losing their minds, little local church with 5 campuses, 6 campuses after 6 or 7 years that are having, what do I do with moral failure? What do I do with all these bills? How do I sign this lease? All the stuff the districts used to have to handle, these guys are now handling, and they're realizing being a little district superintendent is not what it's cracked up to be. You can call it apostle, whatever you want to call it. It's hard. Because men, all of us in this room, we can only be worried about so many things. Okay? You can only be concerned about so many things. So no matter what it looks like, this guy's got 9 campuses, he's flying here, you're like, oh, trust me. What's going on inside that dude is not vacation, okay? Not peace, because he's worried about so many things. I serve an unlimited God, but I have embedded limitations that are with me, that will be with me till Christ comes. So I have things that I'm not talented at, and I think the problem we're having right now in multi-site is with complexity. Now, here's how complexity works. I believe in multi-site. I want to be a multiplier. I want every pastor in this room to be a multiplier. Multi-site is it's a good thing. But understand the complexity of multi-site is this. Let's say I have 2 things to do today. I have 2 folders. This is folder A and this is folder B. And folder A and folder B are my 2 things I got to do today. Those things it's not a matter of having 2 things. What brings us anxiety is our mind's ability to rearrange the things I have to do. So A can be on top of B and then B goes on top of A. But 2 things can only be arranged 2 ways. A and B or B and A. If I add 1 more thing, now I have 3 things. But complexity means that 3 things can be arranged 6 ways. You just have to trust the math on this. If you were doing the math, it would be 3 times 2 times 1. So 3 times 2 is 6, times 1 is 6. So 3 things, A, B, C, B, C, A, C, B, A. So what happens is, in leadership, we have a stack of things that we're thinking about. We got to get done today. And what really the anxiety is, those things keep rearranging themselves. Like this. And you have to reorganize the arrangement factor. So let's add a 4th thing, which is 1 more thing. But 4 things, 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 4 things can be organized 24 different ways. So when you add 1 more thing, the way the mind works is not simple 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the arrangement that constantly has to be prioritized when you're short on time. Do this. I have 10 minutes here. So these things are going, they're like cards. They're constantly doing this. Let's add 1 more thing. We have 5 things. We all have far more than 5 things on our head today. 5 things. 5 times 4 is what? 20. Okay. 20 times 3 is 60. Times 2 is 120. So 5 things can be organized 120 ways. You've gone from 24 things to 120 things by adding 1 thing to your life. Because it's how it's arranged. Let me just tell you, do the math yourself. We all have 10 things in our head. You're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you, but guess how many ways 10 things can be organized in the human mind by shifting? 3,628,880 ways. 3,628,880 ways. 10 things can be arranged in the human mind. So complexity has to be understood. That's why prioritizing, goal setting, and focus keeps the arrangement in order. If you don't have purpose, focus, and goal setting, the devil takes those 10 things and he's doing this to you. And this is why you're fried and you're forgetful. We all are. So we need to lead 10 things, but you have to have tremendous focus and goal setting and make certain that you understand the priority. If you just leave it to whatever, I'm just a leader, I'm responsible, isn't this fun? Pretty soon, that rearranging in the complexity of order of things, it'll drive you to the insane asylum. So why do we plant churches? I was going to give you this verse first, and then we're going to do some Q&A. You're thinking about my complexity thing, and you're doing the math right now, and you said, I have 20 things. You're in the trillions of how many different ways that can work. So the Bible says in 2 Samuel 4, I just love the book of 1 and 2 Samuel, it says, Now Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son crippled at his feet. He was 5 years old when the report of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened that in her hurry, he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. He was 5. Chapter 9, verse 8. Mephibosheth, as a young adult, says, before David, what is your servant that you should regard a dead dog like me? The reason we plant churches is for the kids. I believe that the great mission of the local church is the next generation. Now, here's where we fit. At 54, and this might be a funny word for your hearing, but hear me out on my illustration. We go from stage to sage the older we get in leadership. You become a wise counselor, an elder, a father. you converge and you're able to speak quickly to reality. If you're fighting to be the center of the stage, young, vibrant, to be the dude, you're going to end up on the wrong side of history. I'm not saying that we don't hold microphones and talk in front of people, but what's happening is, I was reading this morning in Matthew about, I told my wife about 5 o'clock this morning, we were awake, I said, honey, I think I'm seeing something here in Matthew. It says, when you fast, don't put on the gloomy face, to be noticed. It says, anoint yourself and really put on the face of abundance and like your stomach's full, so as not to be noticed. It says, for people build treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in. I've also thought of treasures as money. I'm thinking of treasure, though, as more than money based on the context of that text. It could be I'm hoarding attention. I love being noticed. Maybe irrelevance is a gift from God, the older we get, to help wean us off of attention. Maybe we're back into intimacy and secrecy with the Father in the closet. So if the motive for church planting is to stay relevant and noticeable, that's the wrong motive. Especially for guys, because I'm talking to a room of guys primarily over 50 in this room, in my zone. There's some younger guys that have snuck into our party here, but we typically are not going to birth or initiate a church planting idea ourselves and be the stage and the sage. We're going to have a different role. We're going to be a father that enables and creates conditions. Is that me or you? Or it sounds like it's okay. So I think this is critical. So when we become less noticeable,
Joe Pearson.
Yeah, Joe Pearson. That's allowed. I mean, that thing is. It's his wife. Charles Crabtree told me recently. He lives in Sacramento, that his speaking engagements are starting to dry up. And we had a deep mystical conversation about this. And it's not fazing him. He just said, more time with the Lord. More time with the Lord. I'm never going to forget that phrase. So church planting, multiplication is not a last-ditch effort, multi-site by our age, to stay relevant. We want to stay meaningful and fruitful, but it's not to stay relevant. I know it's a subtlety, but remember, substance versus shadow, those two trees. Young leaders, the desire to plant churches and grow churches and be a multiplier is phenomenal. Very few church planters come into my life now that does not have 10 churches in their heart. Nobody's thinking in terms of planting one church. Nobody. They go, we want to go to this region and plant. Don't mock them. Don't look down on them. Don't call them arrogant, prideful. Cultivate and guide that spiritual ambition. We're also seeing a new trend, which is beautiful. The rural community, the town, is coming back on the radar screen. For the last 10 years, I was a church plant director. I must have had 30 people come to me that wanted to plant in San Francisco. It took me 7 years to get someone to plant a church in Placerville. I begged. Finally found a young man out of North Central University. I said, buddy, if it was me, I'd go to Placerville, take the town. 2 high schools. You could own the town. Go own that town. Become mayor of Placerville. You're going to get lost in San Francisco. And I know it sounds urban and cool. Now, we need that. But I love seeing the comeback of the town is happening by younger millennials. And this is a powerful, wonderful thing. So Mephibosheth was a broken kid. That's who we're reaching. Kids who've been dropped in their grandfather's war.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kids who've been dropped in their grandfather's war. We have a whole generation that have been maimed emotionally and mentally, spiritually, in a war not of their making. And they're carried it now into their young adulthood. You try to talk to them, think, I'm a dead dog. Why? Because I got dropped in my grandpa's war. My parents were divorced, dad was divorced, I had this, raised that. The stem, not the seed. That generation of kids, seeing them reached and rebuilt and restored is a powerful motivator for us who are moving from stage to sage in the setting. So you can still be a multiplier. Abram lived to be 175. His multiplication tipping point happened after the halfway point of his life. So we don't have to become a multiplier just in our 20s like, well, that ship sailed. No. But understand your role as a multiplier is not necessarily the stage, but as the sage. You're creating conditions and you are blessing. The oldest person in the room has an ability to bless in a way that nobody else does. There's an authority on the blessing that comes from the oldest person in the room that no other millennial. I tell millennials all the time, don't be a fool and build relationships simply with your peer group. When you're 20, you need to have a great relationship with someone that's 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. When you're 30, have a great friend that's 40, 50, 60, 70, and one that's 20. Keep a 10-year relational grid in your friendship matrix, because what happens is it gives you the balance of understanding this is emotionally what my life is going to look like 30 years from now. The benefit of being at Bethel San Jose is Karen and I at 20 saw life at 30, 40, 50, and 60. We saw happy people. So we knew at every stage, that's what it looks like with teenagers. That's what it looks like with grandkids. That's what it looks like as an empty. These people are happy. It did something emotionally for me. And then I tell millennials this. Every significant opportunity in my life was opened up by an older man. Not one peer ever opened up a door for me. So when you discard older relationships, and this isn't my plea to stay relevant, I mean, I get depressed just like you. We're getting older. And I'll hear my kids, like right now, I'm losing people. Our attendance is down about 200 this year. We've started 4 campuses. We're down 200 in the main campus. I said, hey, mama ship here. Whoa. We got to keep the mama ship strong. You know where I'm losing them? To my son. Tyler and Nicole are 7 miles away downtown in this urban theater. They're killing it. They're cooler. I go, man, the arena campus, we need a hip replacement. So we need a little hip replacement going on here. Oh, and it kind of makes you like, whoa. And then I'll get frustrated and I'll tell my son, you know what, I'm just going to sit in this chair and live long enough to see my kids become irrelevant. Just to prove it. So God is moving us from stage to sage. Okay, it's a awesome thing to be able to speak accurately and quickly into complexity and ambiguity, and to be able to model. And I tell millennial leaders this all the time, our campus pastors. The greatest thing, the greatest contribution of your life is building a great family. You leave a great family on this planet. Build a family, not build a business or build a church. You build a family and give that as a gift to the Mephibosheths who've been dropped in their grandpa's war, who now feel like dead dogs and they can't even receive their inheritance and their purpose in life. I love now planting Harvest Church. My son married a little kid that was 5 years old at Harvest Church. He married Nicole. They grew up together. All these kids I've dedicated through the years are becoming dynamic adults. Not all of them. Some are incarcerated. But there's something amazing about building local churches for the kids that are running around the hallways, not the board members and not the people in the auditorium. It's the kids running down the hallways. Get to know their names. Give them the gift of growing up in a church. Our church is now 11 years old. So if you were in second grade when Real Life Church started, you're now headed off to college. And those kids will say, I grew up in a church. I never heard people, wasn't the biggest church. We got Bayside down the street. And I'm preaching to a third of the amount of people I preached to 15 years ago. But I never felt more influential in my life. It's not about the zeros. It's about multiplying our life, raising up this generation, and blessing them. But if there's a deep insecurity in you because attention, being noticed, you're dead in the water. There's nobody that can help you. There's no hybrid leadership gospel calling that can help you. You have to embrace the fact that, God, you've placed me for a season on this planet to bless, to raise up, to multiply, to plant seed. And maybe the fact that we're less noticeable is actually the weaning away of something that was unhealthy. And it restores us to our Father in heaven who sees me, and He will reward me. I ask people all the time, what's bigger, heaven or hell? What do you think will be more populated? It's a fascinating theological question. Who will have the biggest population, heaven or hell? If you believe what Jesus said, that wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many there be that go in thereat, for straight is the gate and narrow is the way, and few there be that find it. Logically, you'd have to say, I think hell's going to be bigger than heaven. Now, heaven is innumerable, because it's like the sand and the sea that Abram saw. And John couldn't count it, so I'm not saying heaven's a small little rural town in Oregon. You may think it is. But it's fascinating. And the other question is, would you rather know when you're going to die or not know when you're going to die? Would you rather die instantly or know you had 6 months to live? It's a fascinating question to ask people, to really cull out how their spiritual life and leadership. But I'm telling you, we as leaders, we're going through the longevity, brevity tension right now ourselves. We can count years and meaning and like that. And so all of that can just make you be paralyzed. Be a multiplier. Abram multiplied past the halfway point of his life. That's when the revelation registered to him. And it has to register to us in our cities and rural areas. So you've got to be the biggest recruiter, the biggest spokesman for multiplication. You have to bless it, resource it, engage in it, do it in such a way, but don't try to be the grand poobah, the big bishop over your organization, your empire, because you can only think about so many things. Birth, release, bless. And so anyway, we'll open up for some questions, Joe.
Somebody with a question. Some of you sages were... I love the millennial math. I have 4 mothers there, so I'm like, oh. Yeah. Thank you for that. That was really powerful. So let's release. Somebody, question. Multi-siders? Any burned out sages in here? You still on the stage, or you?
Here we go.
In working with millennials, in younger pastors in other churches that have a heart for church planting, were they fearful to step out in church planting partially because of their leaders over them? If they were to cast that vision, how do we create an atmosphere in our network that is a releasing within the churches so that so there's not a threat?
So I'm going to take it from the millennial side of you. So how do we get them released when there's this fear? So millennials are confused right now between the idea of adventure and risk. They love the idea of an adventure. They hate risk.
Yeah.
Whereas we literally, when we planted churches, stuck us on the horse, slapped the horse's butt, said, here's your 50 hymn books in your Gerhardt accounting system. Go have fun. That's like, go do it. Millennials now have to have it all. I had a guy come to me and says, he gave me his proposal for church planting. He was raising $350,000. I went, $350,000. I said, buddy, please don't take this wrong. I give you 20 grand drop you in a strange city, you should be able to plant a church of $20,000 in a strange city. Now, I'm being a little facetious and maybe a little curmudgeonly, but this idea of these massively resourced church plants before we can even start is part of how the beast gets fed, because we're trying to keep, part of the problem with multi-site is we're trying to manufacture the same quality in other locations, day one quality. And so the mother church has the stress of paying for this. I've been talking to some awesome pastors. I've done it, so I'm not saying you made a mistake. This is my mistake. We're trying to recreate the super beautiful smoke and mirrors and amazing sound, lighting, setting up, genre, everything, day one. Old school church planners, day one was a prayer meeting in a borrowed downstairs. I mean, I don't mean to again be, hey, it was better in the old days. But churches were planted prior to the 1980s on Sunday nights in prayer meetings. And somebody would get saved, the town drunk, somebody would be saved, or there'd be a miracle healing. From that excitement, a church would begin to birth. Now, we rent a school, get 500 people to show up on day one in a building that Charles Crabtree said he never preached in a $1 million building until he was 40 years old. Now we have 25-year-olds preaching in a $10 million building at a school, day one, with 500 people marketed into the building. And now you're committed to that, and what happens is introducing the baptism of the Holy Spirit, introducing Jesus, repentance. You have to backfill it because you've got this crowd of people there that the bulk of the crowd is unbelievers. It's a day of Pentecost moment, but Peter didn't try to recreate day of Pentecost the following week. Let's get 3,000 people back outside here. You know, I mean, there was movement. There was this supernatural, divine 3,000, 5,000, but then it went into the houses. And I think we have lost something the way we plant churches out of the large momentum mindset. We've got to get momentum rather than meaning. And that's not to discount or try to, the famous verse where 2 or 3 are gathered. That's a great verse, but it's become the historic pastoral disclaimer for a lousy turnout. So, millennials have to understand risk, not just adventure. And that's part of what has to be bridged in their hearts. If that makes sense.
It does. And as sages, as people who are maybe not millennials, what's the best approach to releasing them with this relationship?
Throw them in the deep end. You got to throw them in the deep end. You've got to see if they can learn to swim in some reality of leadership. Charles Crabtree didn't let me preach for 8 years at Bethel Church. He says, son, trust me. You're already preaching all over the country. He goes, you have a good youth group. Is there something in you that needs to be up on that stage? He kind of hurt my feelings. He said, too much too soon will kill you. But I was in my early 20s. At 26, I was released to go plant a church at 26. And the Lord blessed it. It's grown and it's sustainable. It's a much greater church after I left than when I left. So the Lord used our life early, but we were thrown in the deep end. But you have to let them problem solve and raise money and be very careful how you're guiding that, so you're not like right now we have a campus that lost $60,000 and they ran up some bills because they know Pastor Scott will raise the money. And I recognize, whoa, I got a bad situation here because I'm enabling weak leadership right now in this case because they know I'll bail them out. And so you want to support them, but you don't want to solve the problem for them. Support, don't solve. And I think that is how we guide them. And then helping them get out of their mind that they're competing with Carl Lentz or Richie Wilkerson Jr. and all of the internet comparisons, which are killing our millennials. I didn't compare myself to anybody for between 25 and 35. I didn't even know what was going on in the world. I heard little snippets about a church in another city. But this is every day we're looking, and that those highlight reels, is killing our young leaders. And I don't have an easy answer for this other than to pointedly tell them that's killing you. And that is not how 99% of the kingdom works, is what you're seeing on this guy's, how you perceive this person to be better than you or bigger than you. So that is a devastating variable that's been placed into the leadership landscape, social media.
So it's the role that we could play in that maybe could be to release and bless and be secure in ourselves to let them figure it out without telling them.
And expose them to great godly leaders other than yourself that you admire that are pastoring 75 people, 200 people, 300 people. There's great men who are great leaders that are faithful to God, that are innovative. They're not necessarily social media people. Get that millennial exposed to a broader picture of how God has used many great men and women from small towns, big towns, and like that. So, because we never look at a missionary. Do we ever measure a missionary, ever, on the turnout attendance of what they're doing? Rarely. I mean, I don't ever think of a missionary in terms of, well, there's a missionary in Africa, he's getting 700 out to his Bible college, but this guy in Taiwan is getting 40, I'll go with this. I mean, we want effectiveness, but we don't measure missionaries that way, the way we measure each other's worth when we walk in the room. And we just have to diligently, with intentionality, defeat that spirit.
Well said.
The question I have is, some of our smaller rural churches, they've been established, but they need to be revitalized. Instead of maybe replanting a church, would it be better for a bigger church to help support that?
Yeah.
And how would they do that?
It's a great question. I think, obviously, relationships that are within a legitimate sphere, 50 miles, 100 miles, finding an existing friend that you have that maybe says, hey, do you want to just, your congregation support us in prayer, let's partner. But I think the greatest way to revitalize in small towns, there's a real grace, because it's very identifiable, the needs in a small town. And our small towns in Northern California, Lakeport, has more meth and domestic violence than Compton in Los Angeles. There's more devastating drug addiction and domestic violence in our small towns in Northern California than there is in Oakland and San Francisco. That's not true in every small town, but in our case, there's many. I think churches need to go to Luke 15 and find the most lost and forgotten aspects of their city. What's the most abandoned? In Luke 15, the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. 1% lost, 10% lost, 50% lost. Jonathan Gainsborough taught me that years ago. And also the Good Samaritan, he moved toward the abandonment. So in your small town, say, what is the most overlooked abandoned thing in this community? We're a town of 2,000 people, 800 people. Is there a foster care system here that has 14 kids that are meth babies that have been born, that are living right under our nose in this little town that we weren't even aware of? Send our congregation to the most broken area of our community. And broken means the most abandoned. So the kingdom of God is about removing abandonment. That's what made the Good Samaritan good. I think you revitalize small town churches, bring life, by becoming faith and risk takers, getting into the places which might cost you your life. I think the reason most men are totally bored in our churches is because we tell them to sing, sit, and then hear a sermon, when really the men of our church should be out in areas that they might get killed. The reason why it was so alive in the New Testament is because their life was on the line all the time. We have Disney Church. We create false adventures with predictable endings. And we call it ministry. Then we tell people to go read their Bibles. And then they attend Disney Church on the weekend. But when they read their Bible, their experience on the weekend at our church is not natural to the story that they're reading. So we have to ask God, Lord, how do we make our congregations natural to this story? And I believe being in the riskiest places of the city, in the community, in the town, brings us into the more natural spot of this story personally.